Oh, hi. Before we get into the actual episode, I've recorded a bit of a special opening today. As you likely already know, I'm slow at editing the podcast, and there can be a delay of a few days between the recording and the actual publishing of the show. This episode was originally recorded on Tuesday, July 20th, and a few things have happened since then. Yesterday, on Wednesday the 21st, I got an awesome gift from the Diablo Immortal team thanking me for helping test the game, and well, it was pretty cool with a personalized hoodie amongst other things. But then a few hours later, well, things went south in a really bad way. You likely already know what I'm about to say, but it bears repeating. Last night, the state of California filed a lawsuit against Blizzard over allegations of sexual harassment, discrimination, amongst other things. This is deeply troubling, and it honestly would be a disservice to everyone in the community, both, content creators, the community itself, and other Blizzard developers, to not bring up these allegations. Because by not discussing these things and by not outrightly, and directly denouncing these kinds of behaviors would just allow these things to continue. The allegations being leveled at Blizzard are abhorrent and appalling, to say the least, and it makes everything surrounding them complicated. I've seen others outrightly swear off Blizzard and its games, but for every abuser in situations like this, there are many more victims that worked on the games and products that we love. What's the right course of action in these situations? And I honestly don't know. I don't have an answer to that question, but I do know at least it starts with holding Blizzard accountable. Well, later on in this episode, I do mention that I was going to plan on streaming, the opening for Season 24. I'm not so sure about that at the moment. We'll just have to wait and see, how those things work out. But I do know this, at least. Blizzard, do better. Be better. And with that, now on to the rest of the show. Thank you, and, well, believe the victims. Oh, hi! Here we are. It's another Tuesday, and we got another episode going through, coming at you. As you probably have guessed, there's a few things to talk about in the realm of Diablo. So I'd like to go ahead and let's just jump right into it. Welcome to episode 214. 2.7.1 is here because you like to hear numbers, and we're recording on, the 7th month of 2021 on the 20th day at 9:04 p.m. just to throw even more numbers in there. But yeah, as I mentioned on the last episode, I'm recording on a Tuesday because my Wednesday is busy. It's spoken for, and so we're changing things up ever so slightly, in order to go through and work with that. But the show must go on, of course, as they say. But in tonight's episode, we got some things. We got my weeks in gaming, which hasn't involved much gaming. My relief at the Blizzard Vault release. Of course, as is the title of the episode, we've got a lot of things to go through and talk about. Patch 2.7.1 and Season 24. Don't do the challenge rift yet. We've also got some things to talk about with Diablo II Resurrected, as we've gotten a couple of blogs. We've been having some weekly blogs since the previous episode to go and talk about some of the learnings and changes that we've had since the previous alpha, and then just some thoughts and feelings on Diablo Immortal to go through and close out the show. Without further ado, of course, my weeks in gaming, I actually haven't really played much computer games in quite some time. I think, more or less, the last game that I really played was Diablo 3 to just go through and finish up Guardian, and that was, about a month ago. Otherwise, as I've talked about on a lot of the episodes, I have been preparing for the big Warhammer tournament that's going through and coming up. On August 14th. So it's mostly been painting I've only really gotten like one practice game in. But if you're following me on Twitter, you know, I went through and posted, you know, some of the models that I painted up, which I think I can go through and just pull that up real quick. But yeah, I'm far from the best painter. I'm very, very far from the best painter, indeed. Let's go ahead and just find these real quick. So just, you know, some of the Blood Knights, they're like vampire cavalry. You know, they're vampire knights riding around on undead steeds and such. Just to show off a little bit of the work. That first model was just kind of like the test scheme, and so now I'm going through and I'm going to be assembly lining it in order to try and, you know, speed through the rest of the process, because I've only got about 3 weeks left. You know, I guess, well, I got 3 weekends, 4 weeks left, you know, in order to get everything prepped and prepared before August 14th. So expect quite a bit more Age of Sigmar and Warhammer discussions on Twitter, and, you know, for the next episode will probably be a bit short, because it's going to be, you know, that next episode is going to be coming up on, what is that, the 3rd? Or not the 3rd, I'm looking at the Tuesday. It's like we're not moving from Wednesdays, it's just the special as it is right now. But I guess it's going to be the 4th at the moment, provided, you know, work doesn't throw anything else at me in the evenings. We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully. Remain hopeful. But yeah, expect a lot more Age of Sigmar talk and stuff. Though, I guess, with the next episode, I will have some other Diablo-related things to talk about in terms of gaming, because we've got the new season, you know, that's going through and dropping, which we can, you know, go ahead and, I guess, jump into. Though I do want to say one quick thing. As I mentioned on the last episode, that second Tuesday of every month is always scary, because I never know what's going to be actually dropping in the vault. And this week, or this month, it wasn't anything too much, thankfully. Go through and pop up here real quick. And so it was just some sketches. There's a whole bunch of the figures and stuff from the previous months. There's the $1,100, you know, Arthas statue. It is, like, you know, is huge. It's 2 feet tall, but, you know, it's not something I'm going to be dropping a grand on. But it's just, you know, a couple of concept sketches, you know, of Kerrigan. We got Zul'jin and, like, the Anoyatron and such. You know, so it's just like little tiny things that they added in for this month's vault. Though September's going to be scary, because that's when Diablo II Resurrected drops. So they tend to line stuff up, as you saw on that image that I just had pulled up there. Like, there was, like, the Burning Crusade Classic shirts, because last month was, like, the launch of Burning Crusade Classic, so it was all Burning Crusade, Illidan related merchandise. It's like they brought back that Illidan statue, you know, which was, like, kind of like, you know, like the limited time thing. It's been sold out for a while. You know, but every second Tuesday of every month is just like, please do not drop another big expensive Diablo statue, because I've already got too many sitting in the background with no real place to put them. But you know, as I was mentioning before, we do have got some stuff here to talk about with the new patch 2.7.1, which, you know, in the previous episode I was talking about how there's really, once we knew the end date, there was only 2 real answers as to when the patch would be, or when the season 24 would be dropping, and that was July 23rd or July 30th. And, well, here we have it. We, again, only that 1 week turnaround time, and it's dropping on the July 23rd. So I hope that you managed to go through and get all of your seasonal goals done. You know, you got your Guardian or whatever it is that you set out to achieve, whether it be something on the leaderboard. If you're one of those crazy people, like I was seeing Woody Joe had went through and competed on every single softcore leaderboard So every single set for every single class, and a couple of the hardcore ones too. That is some hardcore dedication right there. That is insanity. And now, I mean, with the new season 24 with the ethereals coming, it's like almost the norm, because you're gonna wanting to be grinding out on every single class to get the unlock for the Feat of Strength, so that way you get all the awesome transmogs. Though not that level of dedication, of course. You just kind of have to get a character to 70 in order to you know, mess around and, you know, farm for a little bit in order to get them to drop. They're not primals, you know, they're not primals, but they are a little bit rarer than ancients. So it will take some grinding in order to go through and get them. And we won't know, and I've talked about this on previous episodes, that one of the quickest ways of like actually like grinding through them was to get a level 11 character, die, and then have a friend like run through Torment 6 Rifts, because you cut down on the drop pool so much of like other legendaries and such that you have the like an upscaled chance of getting the ethereals. At the moment, it doesn't look like, because at least the wording in the patch notes still remains, that you just have to get all of the ethereal items in order to unlock the Feat of Strength. It doesn't say that it requires you to be level 70, but that's again one of those ones where probably won't know. Can you game the system in the upcoming season, or will you have to do it legitimately? Unsure, but it's not like it's going to be like that hard. You know, your first character you get up, you know, just start leveling up like a Gym of Ease, or just have someone power level you. You know, it takes just a couple of torment runs once you're actually, you know, capable of like speed clearing T6s, which is almost instantly at 70. And then you can get another level 70 character and just dump some blood shards into them to farm up and start getting those pretty teal greens. I want to say, you know, it's not dropping oranges, not dropping greens. They're like a tealish green, nice, pretty color, almost like Death's Breaths. But you know, now that we have like the full patch notes and everything, it seems that there were a few changes that they had added. So I just want to bring those up on the screen right now. So there was a couple of changes from the PTR where they improved the AI yet again on Mystic Ally, specifically for the Fire Ally. And then also for Rabid Strike, the Spirit Spenders that teleport you while Epiphany is active is also mimicked to a nearby target for the 350 to 450% increased damage. And then just a couple of fixes, you know, so that way you get the all Mystic Allies and their abilities now benefit from the plus Mystic Ally damage, because there was some, you know, issues on the PTR where it wasn't functioning properly. You know, some proc issues with Shenlongs, and then also just some issues with the Gibden, which was not functioning properly, so it didn't get like fully tested on the PTR because it wasn't applying to the sycophants, you know, from the passive. But otherwise, you know, they're just, you know, your general brand new patch stuff. I mean, that this is obviously coming a little bit late, but I hope that you did not yet complete the challenge rift on Monday, because as always, the best way to hit up your season is to wait for the season to start and then do the challenge rift at that point. So that way you start off and you can get all of your vendors, you know, up to max level. You can gamble, you know, certain legendaries and such in order to go through and push your characters through. You can also get some crafting materials to try and get yourself a craft level 70 weapon, and then try and throw the reduced level requirement, so that way you can get it like down, you know, into the 40s, as close to 40 as possible, so that way you can then, you know, just blast through the last couple of levels as you're leveling. And then, you know, we've got the Hadrig's gifts here, and one of the interesting things is that it's a pretty solid collection of Hadrig's gifts that are going through and popping up this time, because there are some, such as the Natalia's, like the Natalia's rapid fire build, or the Crusaders, Seeker of Light, are both like, rather decent, pushing builds. They're not the best. They're still, like 10 greater rift levels, below the best, but they're ones that can take you more or less like straight to the end game. The other ones are all still, relatively decent. The Ulianas, Immortal Kings, and the Spirit of Erekir, for their respective classes, are also still pretty nice. They're all kind of like in that B tier of sets that will get you set up and rolling, pretty quickly. And the weakest ones are the Veers and the Tragols, which are they just are definitely like showing their age. They're at least still pretty good starter builds. Tragols is probably the weakest this round, just because you really are just getting increased health. You're just getting survivability. You're not really getting all that great of a damage boost from Tragols with only the 4-piece in order to do your GR20. But at the same time, just get yourself an Essence Grasp. Just gamble that Essence Grasp at level 1, get those gloves, cube them, and you're done. It's like the Necromancer is like the easiest class to get to 70 with, just because of the insanity of Essence Grasp combined with Corpse Explosion. The damage multipliers on it are just crazy. The Necromancer does not need a set in order to do their GR20, in order to go through and get the 6-piece and pushed out. Which, with the last season rework of Rathmas, maybe we'll see a rework of Tragols sometime soon. We got Ina's, that was the big rework for putting monks up there for this season, and we don't know what is going to be coming with the next patch or season 25 as things continue to rotate in. I did also want to go through and just share a little bit, like if you want to go through and check out, obviously one of the best resources out there for wanting to go and trying to plan out your season if you're really trying to hit it hard is maxroll.gg, and it has been updated for the season 24 solo tier list that includes ethereals. So you're gonna see a lot of changes in here. There is like the little star there, like for the Ina's Mystic Ally, like the second, what is assumed to be the second best S tier set in the game. Is brand new because it's all new play style and such. But with the absolute best one right now, it's Theorycraft to be that the Legacy of Dreams Wave of Light build for the monk is going to be the best, the best S tier solo pushing build that there will be. So if you're looking to try and get like the absolute craziest, it's going to be monk. Though obviously it's a monk, so there are going to be like some survivability issues. It's not a playstyle that is for everybody, but like there's so many monk builds that got a huge boost, through like the ethereals or other things that are going on with the updates and such. So it's definitely worth going through, checking out. And then of course the Ina's is the new, that's with all the Mystic Allies is the new hotness, though there were some performance issues that were reported on the PTR. Just anything that creates more calculations, and because it's like a pseudo pet build, it's just, multiple sources of damage causing more calculations, and when you get into those higher end pushes can start to lag the game. If you're just doing it solo, not really all that big of a problem. Or if you're just using it with like your friends and you're just casually clearing like 120s, 130s, again, it's like a specific like play style where you're grouping up like the mobs in order to push them down. It's that end game kind of like play style that it really has that biggest issue for. And also, like, even despite the nerfs, the Aegis of Valor for Crusaders is still considered an S tier. It is getting hit pretty hard with the nerf for the multiplicative scaling on the 2-piece set bonus, but it's still up there. Every single class right now has an S tier build. Like this is one of those that obviously there's always some jockeying for position of what's the best, what's the hottest, but like everybody can kind of compete at that really high tier level. This is of course theoretical. Those ethereals are really going to change the way that these things play out. If someone discovers some sort of interaction, or if like one class that just gets like a god roll on the passive in the legendary ability for on like the right ethereal could potentially like shoot its way all the way up, because that's when like the Gears of the Dreadlands, the god build for Demon Hunters with the Hungering Arrow, with the interactions with the Bariza of the bonus damage when you freeze the enemies, with all the piercing and other stuff going on, like that one is also another one that's like got sent like to the moon in terms of its power. It is there's a lot of things that you just don't have enough time in those 2 weeks, especially when there's changes that are implemented in the second week of the PTR to like get the full grasp of everything. And it's something I've seen some of the content creators also note, that because they can't just get access to like everything, and they still have to like farm up materials and try and like like they have to get gems to reroll stats on like the amulets and rings and such. There's all these things that kind of hamper them while trying to test out the seasonal bonuses, that like that 1 week test time is like kind of like a little short. They're trying to put in so much effort to test these things, and big props to everyone over on like the Maxwellgg team for putting this stuff together, because it takes some insane dedication and a lot of play hours, especially when you're going through, you do this mad rush to test for 2 weeks, and when you know that PTR ends, you're about to get like the 2 week warning for the end of the season. So you're going from like a 2 week cram session on the PTR to like a 2 week cram session in order to try and get your position at the top of the leaderboard. So yeah, again, big props to everybody that put in the time and effort to put these guides together and resources for the community. And I guess I should also note that this July 23rd is also the Path of Exile new league start, and it's really funny, because it's like every new Diablo season is always, oh, power creep. The new hotness is pushing everything up, though they have been really good about going through and applying common sense nerfs and bringing certain abilities and sets back down to a more reasonable level. I mean, this is the 6th time that they've nerfed Aegis of Valor, and who knows, maybe it'll get nerfed again, because it's still doing well. But it is they are at least a bit more cognizant of the infinite power creep and trying to bring things down, so one doesn't stand head and shoulders above everything else, even though it still kind of happens, but they'll try and bring it back into scope later on. And then I don't follow Path of Exile, so I can't speak to the nature of the update and such. I've just seen the reactions, and it's been kind of muted, because I guess that they're nerfing like the movement speed, and that can cause a lot of issues with trying to dodge projectiles at higher end maps and such. And again, I can't speak to it. I don't play Path, and I don't know the I could read the patch notes for Path of Exile, but they don't make any sense to me. But it seems that it's had a far more muted response than some of the previous leagues. But that happens. The GGG experiments, they do things. Sometimes it doesn't resonate well with the community. Other times, they've had to go through and they've cut leagues short because, well, this just isn't working. We'll like revert it and do something else, just as like a patch fix. And that's cool. I mean, that's awesome. I'd love to go through and continue to see more of that, like in Diablo, especially like with these ethereals, where like the stuff is getting, as SVR puts it, voided. And so everything that you go through, achieve, and that thing that gives you all of your power in the season is removed at the end of the season, you'll never be able to do that type of things again. I talked about this, I think it was like last year. It was the beginning of last year where we got that 4th Kanai's Cube slot, where it's like, if you didn't play a Poison Nova Necromancer, then you just missed out, because that was going to be the highest that you could ever push with a Poison Nova Necromancer, and it was like one of the best builds at that particular point, just because of the way that scaling and item interactions and all that work. That there's going to be some cool stuff that you can play around with in this season that just, you know, either not necessarily won't work again, because we're not getting like an extra legendary slot, we're not getting an extra legendary power, we're just getting extra passive, and that the nature of passives in Diablo don't unlock playstyles, they just make them better. So it's just going to make certain playstyles more efficient or better, but they're not really going to unlock anything. But yeah, this season is going to be one of the highest that you can push with a lot of sets, unless your set, you know, just got nerfed, like Aegis of Valor or the, you know, the Masquerade or the Burning Carnival for the Necromancers. So it's something that's worth at least going through, messing around with, checking out. And the one final thing that I also wanted to mention for you know, the season 24, to kind of like give you a heads up, is Maxwellgg also has like their tier lists, and they have like the metas. While not everybody is necessarily going to be going through and pushing for the leaderboards or the multiplayer leaderboards or such, one thing that I think that most people might just experience, because you're going to be going through, you're playing with friends, you know, or at least for those that aren't doing solo self-found or solo play, for the people that are going to be going and like playing with friends and such, things I guess are changed up, you know, like a little bit with the season 24 experience meta. So the most efficient ways of going through and grinding XP, if you're just going to be like trying to power through things with your friends, for this season, the Firebirds, or the birds runs as they call it, has been pushed up to the top, whereas previously it was a contender with rat runs. And so like kind of like the best experience farming build right now is shaping up to be 2 Firebird Wizards, a ZDH, and a Z-Barb. So a support Demon Hunter and a support Barbarian, in order to go through and push it out. And then also coming back in, because the monk has actually been a little bit missing, you know, from some of the higher end play, just due to the nature that, like, you know, support Demon Hunters and support Necromancers have, you know, kind of like found their way and have gotten like those viable slots and such, and so that the good old support Barbarian, support, you know, Monk hasn't been as big of a thing, you know, in some of the metas in the past, besides of course like just like the extreme high end pushing. But then like the second best is actually, it's the Bells, the Wave of Light. So 2 Wave of Light monks with, again, the support Demon Hunter and the support Barbarian, and you'll never be able to get rid of it. Is of course following that is your typical rat runs, you know, with the 2 you know, rat necromancers, which is funny because you don't use Rathmas, and Rathmas doesn't even work, you know, for it anymore, but that's just, you know, how things get named, right? And then of course the support Necromancer, and a support Barb, though a support Demon Hunter could also potentially work as a slot in. But it's generally, once you go rats, it's like 3 Necromancers and whatever else that you want to fill. It's kind of self-sufficient. You're just doing it for the CC and health orbs, right? But yeah, so the other thing that I wanted to go through and jump into some detail for tonight's episode is that we had a couple of blogs over the past 2 weeks. They've been doing like 1 blog a week that they've been talking about things from the Diablo II Resurrected Technical Alpha. And it's actually pretty cool going through. I've just always been one of those people that enjoys seeing the development process. You know, well, obviously, if you listen to this podcast, you know, I talk about the development process and maybe what the developers' mindsets are and such a lot. And so getting to peer a little bit behind the curtain as they've been not just with Diablo 4, but Diablo Immortal and D2, a little bit more candid with going through and sharing with us the process, the steps that they're going through, and so forth. And so they're just going through and hitting some of the major notes. One of the big pieces was the arts and visuals. While, if you watch my streams during the technical alpha, like, I was just blown away by how cool and awesome everything was. But there were a couple of misses. A lot of people didn't like that, like, the lightning spells had like a bluish hinge. They preferred it that it was just like kind of like the pure white that Diablo 2 was. So there was no blue hues in it whatsoever. And so they're going through and they're making that change. They're also going to be making the visualizations thicker, and kind of like going and whiting them out. They didn't give us a look at that, but just noting it that they are trying to recapture that feel for what it looked like in Diablo 2. And then, like, one of the awesome ones here is that it shows like the sorceress's blizzard. That there was also a lot of feedback that the original implementation of the skill in the technical alpha didn't quite hit the mark. And so if you're not able to see the image on screen, it goes through the original Diablo 2, which is just like some cones and some like snowballs that kind of like slowly fall from the heavens onto the ground. And they tried to capture that in the technical alpha, so it still has like kind of like that slow fall to the ground with a couple of different shapes that are thrown in there. While that is a true recreation of what we're seeing from the original Diablo 2 take, obviously doesn't scale up that great when you're going through and actually like trying to make this look like a modern style like ARPG. And so they just went all out. They better recreated, like the kind of like the iconic little cones and balls of the blizzards, the blizzard skill from Diablo 2, but they ramped it to 11 and sped it up. So I'm sure mechanically it's still functioning the same way, but they're falling from a higher distance. So even though it's traveling faster, the actual kind of like time to hit the ground from the trigger of the spell looks like it's going to be exactly the same. Well, it's running the same engine, so obviously it's going to be exactly the same. But they're just tricking you into thinking that it's moving faster, but it's dropping from a taller height in order to achieve that, which is just like props. That is awesome. That's like a great little kind of like psychological trick where it makes it look cooler and faster and more rhythmic, but while still making it work, since it's the original Diablo 2 running in the background. So kudos. That's cool. That's just awesome. One of the other ones was the freeze. When a monster had like the chill effect or were frozen, they were a bright, like that is like a super like pastel blue. And that's something that we talked about on my stream, playing it through a couple of times. But they've gone back and they've changed it. So now it's a bit closer to that very dark blue from Diablo 2. So it's no longer kind of like the pastel blue. Well, I will say it looks better in these still images. It definitely looks better. There's no argument there. I do wonder, once you get in and start playing the game, because one of my complaints with the Diablo 2 technical alpha was there's just some readability problems. Like, everything looks so great, but one of the things that Diablo 2 did was it used a very stark color palette in order to communicate things to you. Everything was, everything's like really dark tones and desaturated, but like when you froze an enemy, that blue really stood out because like nothing else on the screen is blue, and it's just a whole bunch of 2D models overlaid one another. in this game, with that 3D engine on top of it, where things have depth and lighting and shades and textures that they did not in Diablo 2, that makes the readability a lot harder. And so that was one of the ones that I imagine that that bright pastel blue was for communicating that the enemy was afflicted by it, because it can be hard to tell. Like going and looking at the screenshots, you know, especially when you go through and you have like there's some like skeleton mages underneath the archway, it might be hard to tell, you know, well, you know, is that just a frost mage or is it frozen? You know, it's harder to instantly pick up the status of those mobs. That was, you know, actually pretty easy in Diablo 2. But that is going to be you know, that's a concession. There's no perfect way of nailing it, of being able to keep that the 3D lighting and textures and all that you would expect, while also still like staying true to kind of like that aesthetic that D2 had. It's just like the pastel blue doesn't work, you know. And so are you willing to give up like that instant readability that worked in D2 for a better looking Resurrected? You know, so there's always going to be like a trade-off when you're doing things like that. And I'm sure that's the conversation that's going on in the development team. And once, you know, we get to go through and, you know, play the game, as the beta is coming up shortly. They said it's in August, and as I mentioned on the previous episode, you know, we had the 2 dates for the start of Season 24, the 23rd or the 30th. And now with Season 23, they pushed up Season 23 and gave us only a 1-week turnaround time because they dropped the Diablo 2 Resurrected technical alpha on us like immediately afterwards. It makes me think that the reason why we have the Diablo season starting on the 23rd instead of the 30th is because then that next week, so sometime of the week of August 1st, we might be getting the Diablo beta dropped. It's you know, it's like the full game, but we don't have all the classes. But in order to like implement any changes from that, they're going to need time, and the game launches on September 23rd. So if they drop, you know, the alpha, say like on Tuesday, August 3rd, because Tuesday is, you know, it's a safe bet, right, for updates and patches and all that other type of stuff to drop. If they dropped it on the 3rd, that would still give them, you know, a full month of testing and then a couple of weeks left over to implement any changes that they wanted to before the game dropped. Or even if it's only like 2 weeks of testing, 3 weeks of testing. You know, like what we had with the technical alpha. So yeah, I do think that, you know, Season 24 dropping on the 23rd is a pretty good indication we're only a few weeks away from beta, people. So if you haven't yet, you can guarantee your spot in the beta by going through and pre-ordering Diablo 2 Resurrected. I know PC Master Race, don't pre-order games, all that other type of stuff, but hey, the transmog's cool, right? You get the Barbarian transmog, which is in the game now with the patch that dropped today. You can actually use it. And hey, guaranteed beta access. But if you want to you know, hold out, trust in your luck, see if you get a just the random beta invites, which I imagine they have to continue to do the random beta invites, and that's not just a pay for play. That they'll still invite people in, or because they did tons of giveaways for like Diablo Immortal. I can't remember specifically if they did that many giveaways for the technical alpha. They did do multiple waves of the technical alpha for D2R. But I'm sure that there'll probably be, you know, some giveaways and stuff like that. They did on like Instagram and Twitter and I think Facebook too for like the official Diablo accounts for chances to win. So just keep your eyes on that. I'm sure we're gonna be learning, you know, within like the next next week or two. Well, obviously the next 2 weeks. We should definitely know that is whether it's coming at the beginning of August or not. But just keep your eyes peeled. Going back on, continuing with the dev team's learnings from the technical alpha, there was also the icons. So there was, the new images that they had for the potions. While they tried to recapture the essence of the D2 potions, they were very muted. Like the contrast was just off. Like it was like ramped up like way too bright on the images. And so now they've touched it. They've changed some of the textures a little bit, but they've also brought the contrast back in a little bit, so that the potions just look better, higher definition. They're not, when you're looking at the icons in the game, they just looked a little bit washed out. So those are definitely going through, looking better. Same thing for the gyms. They went through and they showed off, the gyms and how they look compared. Where these ones, they darkened it. They added a little bit, more shading and such to like the lower level gyms. So your chip, your flawed, and then your gem. So in the image that they gave us was the ruby. So the chipped ruby, the flawed ruby, and then the ruby, they like darkened it compared to what it was in the technical alpha. But then the flawless and the perfect, they actually kind of like brightened and dropped the detail on a little bit. So this one I'm conflicted on, because I definitely like the look of the flawed chipped and regular gems better with the current iteration with that they have at the moment that they're sharing with us, as opposed to what we saw in the technical alpha. But then I liked the technical alpha's perfect gem and flawless gems better. They're a little bit darker, and you can see more of the facets inside of the gem and like the inner reflections and such. I think it's just looks a little bit nicer. And then finally we've got the skulls. I honestly really had no complaint about the skulls from the technical alpha. The ones that they had the learnings from, they're just adding a little bit more texture to them. There's more cracks in the skull, or at least the cracks in the skull are a lot more visible. They changed the palette a little bit, so it's more of a white instead of a yellow, so it's more of kind of like that bleached bone instead of aged bone. Which this one is, of course, going to kind of come down to purely just like your personal preference and aesthetics. But as I was talking about my models and painting that I've been doing for Age of Sigmar, I prefer the aged bone look. You've got like the bleached bone where you're painting like white bones, or like the bleached bones where you're like adding a little bit of a yellowish hue to it. And I like the aged bone with like a little bit of the yellows and the browns. I like that look aesthetically better than just like the pure white bone. That's my personal preference. I know. But I think that both sets look pretty awesome. To be honest, I would be happy with either that they went with. And then also we got to see just some generic icons for items and such. They're just adding a little bit more definition to like the charms. A little bit more lighting to like the bows and the shields. This is also another one I like the shield that they showed in the. Let me 1 second here, because my face is covering. Let me just drop this real quick, so that way the people that are watching this on YouTube or in the live stream can see it a little bit better. But so the original Diablo II shield that they showed off is just like your regular shield that you can find while leveling through the game. It it's old, it's worn. You can see like the individual planks of wood, and the paint is chipped. And I like the one in the technical alpha more, just because it has more of that aged look. So you can see like the wear and the tear of it more than what they're working on with the current iteration. But I guess that also, again, that just kind of comes down to personal preference. You know, and the aesthetics, which is what a lot of art really is. It is all, you know, personal preference and aesthetics. You're never going to please everybody when it comes to it. You know, the obviously, though, you know, saying that, we had, you know, the look at the character art from the last Diablo 4 dev blog, and it was almost like pure unanimous. I haven't seen as much of a positive reaction to one of the Diablo 4 blogs, I think, ever since that, because there at least there's always something to critique, right? Oh, they didn't show us enough items. They didn't show us, you know, these skills. This isn't that isn't what was Quinn's. That's not a skill tree. That's a skill twig. You know, there's always something to be said, or, you know, that another ARPG is doing better or something like that, or you're not as happy with the item design. But the art, at least the art that they showed, I haven't seen anybody complain about the art, besides people that just straight up want to do nothing but dunk on the Diablo series as a whole. But, you know, not like their feedback is really valid, because they hate it for the purpose of hating it. But, you know, to each their own, of course, as we're talking about personal preferences. And then, you know, this one they also went through in a little bit more like quality of life changes and accessibility that we'll talk about in a little bit. But just, you know, they're going through and they're giving like larger font modes, UI scaling, more contrast settings, to allow players to just, you know, customize, change up the game for how they want. And this is something that I think is just true to any Blizzard title, and that, say what you will about like balance or gameplay or anything, I don't think that any company goes to the same extent that Blizzard does in terms of accessibility options, where it's just built into every single one of their games, and it's a pillar of the development teams that's required, that you need to make sure that you have the game itself like fully accessible. And we're not talking like accessibility in terms of like difficulty, you know, or like, you know, Dark Souls versus Mario Kart or anything like that. We're talking about things that allow people to play the game. You know, even something as simple as a large font mode. You know, some people might have issues that, you know, well, you know, it's Diablo. Is that a 5 or an S? You know, it's like, that's just, it's like the certain things like the font types and stuff. You know, Diablo 2, like some of the accessibility problems were just community memes, right? And so they're just things that they're acknowledging and trying to add, you know, things to that will allow more people that, you know, might have an issue or something, you know, that prevents them from experiencing the game in the same way that someone else might, you know, whether it be, you know, a disability or something along those lines, that they just, you know, even something as simple as, like, I spent, like, just as an example, today I spent like my entire shift cataloging, I can speak, serial numbers off of monitors, computers, servers, and like everything in the entire building. It was ginormous. We were doing an IT inventory, and it's not like we were like double checking an inventory, it's we were creating one. And so I had to pop it in ceiling tiles and all the other type of stuff to find every single device in the entire building, and then recording its serial numbers. Like, by the end of the day, like legitimately, I was having problems. If it had repeating numbers, like if it had 3 zeros, like I would stare at it for a minute and be like, how many zeros are there? Is it 3? Is it 5? Like, my brain was just like cross-wiring. You know, it's like if there's like just like 2 6s, like is that 3 6s or a 9 or a 7? Like, I had to give myself some time. By the end of the day, like my brain was just fried, and everything was just like going through and running together. And when you're having to sit there and stare at a bunch of like little tiny font, especially with now that the game is going through and blowing up the ultra widescreen support, all those other types of thing, yeah, I can definitely see myself at the end of like a long day of work, if I sit down and play some Diablo 2 Resurrected, I might turn on the large font mode just so that way I don't have to rack my brain any further to try and pick up like little tiny items or anything along those lines. So like by all means, it's, you know, it makes my life easier in that respect. And so I can only imagine what that would do for someone, you know, that has issues with reading or sequential numbers or tiny fonts and such. So again, nothing but good changes. Take all the time you need. If it, you know, if adding in better accessibility options like would in some way, shape, or form push back the release date of the game, fine, do it. Like, no one should complain about that because they're making the game, you know, more accessible to everybody. And again, this isn't difficulty or, you know, bringing the game down, or that's a whole different discussion. And I just saw that like a couple days ago on like, you know, developer Twitter and such. And like, I'm not even going to get into that. But this is just making it so that way people can play the game, period. You know, you think about like certain things like color blindness and such, where there's a whole gamut of things that can interrupt people's play. And we'll actually be talking a little bit about more of that in a second. But then, like, another great change, we're getting 3 shared stash tabs instead of just 1. Awesome. You know, so now you have your stash tab, and then you have 3 shared stash tabs. So you've got a ton of space to go and save all of your items. What could be better, right? You know, and so they're also just, you know, adding in some changes. This was one that actually surprised me, but then became like a really common complaint, the Automap. Like, if you played Diablo 2 back in the day, you played Diablo 2. You know, the game was just up on the map was just up on the screen. It was taking up the entirety of your screen, and you're just playing the game, looking through it, and that was just the way that you played. Like, that's fine. But then I had people that had never played the game before, or even people that like played the game and they just were like coming back to it, and like they're watching my stream and they're like, "What is up with that map, yo?" And then when I was going through and playing the game and like showing Neve and such, was like, this is what created my love for Diablo and caused me to spend all of this money for all this shit in the background. And she's just like, that map is ugly. Like, how dare you? How dare you? But then you see it more and more on Twitter and Reddit and all those other types of stuff. And so they're making some changes to the auto map to make it a little bit better. I wish that they had showed some pictures because I'll be interested in seeing it. But yeah, it's like, I don't know. It's just like, it's like the way that the game was, right? They're changing things and I'm scared. And, you know, just some like other little things like adding a clock. I mean, awesome. Great. Love it. Like, just so that way you can go through and see the time. And then like the loading screen. They're improving load times, which we had issues with, you know, during the technical alpha, but some people were actually like loading in and getting killed by the monsters. I didn't experience that one, but it was pretty widespread. And so now they're also adding in like a little bit of like I guess invulnerability or something like that. So the characters shouldn't get attacked when you spawn in. You're not gonna spawn in dead, hopefully. And then they've also like reduced some of like the grunts and yelps and such that were added. But yeah, they're definitely, and they also just like the steps. They're looking forward to the early access beta. You know, and continuing to thank, you know, the community for like the feedback and support. Which of course, you know, it's Diablo 2. It's near and dear to very many people, and like, you know, it you know, Diablo 2 created the genre. You know, obviously there were ARPGs before it. There were ARPGs before Diablo, the original Diablo, but it was D2 that defined it. You know, I don't think that's a stretch at all to say. So Path of Exile players, they you know they're looking forward to this because it's the classic. Whether they grew up playing it, you know, like I did, you know, or it's just they hear so much about it, but they didn't want to go and play a 21-year-old game, and they're interested in going and checking it out with the updated graphics. it's just a great time to be an ARPG player. It's a great time to be a Diablo player. The next blog that we went through and we got actually dropped earlier today, and this one is entirely focused on accessibility. And this one, you know, it goes through, and I just want to talk, you know, as I mentioned before, about like it's kind of like one of those divine pillars, or like one of the development pillars with accessibility, not just like on like the Diablo team, but all across Blizzard on every single franchise, every single team. That they opened it, you know, with philosophy. And so I'm just going to go through and read this directly from the article. And this is Drew McCroy, who is the UX accessibility lead that is writing this article. And so, you know, these are his words. So when we first sat down with the intent of modernizing one of the most beloved ARPGs of all time, we knew that there was work to do from all angles. The game is over 20 years old, and the longtime Diablo II community is ravenous and heavily entrenched in decades of eccentricities and quirks. Our team includes many Diablo II purists who have thousands upon thousands of hours in the game before working on it professionally, and our goal is not to break what isn't broken. One thing we agree on is that it doesn't matter how pretty the grass is if you can't see the legendary staff on the ground. It ultimately sabotages the core gameplay experience. Accessibility is one major area of opportunity for this remaster to shine, and our intention to bring games to more players has evolved and is more refined now than ever before. And so, like, this is one of those things that it goes through and, you know, begins to talk about accessibility. Like, even just, like, one of the things, like, having the auto gold pickup, you know, and not having to tap, you know, you have a whole bunch of gold that goes through and drops on the ground. Well, if there's 15 piles of gold, you got to click 15 times. And, you know, we've all had, you know, that ARPG RSI go through and set in, and so just being able to run across, you know, click once, run across, and pick up everything is definitely much better, of course. And then just like some of your standard stuff, you know, like as I was mentioning, like the larger font, but like UI scaling, gamma and contrast settings in order to increase like the readability, to help open up that gameplay, or even just something as like as it says, like the auto gold pickup allows the ability to better play for someone with a controller. Not everybody can play with a mouse or keyboard. You know, beyond the fact that it's coming to consoles. Some people, it's just better or easier for them to play with a controller than anything else. And then they also talked about one of the other ones where this is, again, that nature of the certain things just don't communicate well when you go from that 2D engine to the 3D engine. And they're talking about that with like the miss. So when you have like melee attacks and such, how it's hard to go and communicate. You're just sitting there and your weapon's just going through the enemy model, whether you hit them or not. And maybe you just like miss like the whiff sound or something like that. And so they added in an option that when you attack with a melee weapon and you whiff, you can enable, it's not default, but you can enable an option where it will just pop up with a little text that says miss. And I do love that they acknowledge that, you know, like in the background it's like rolling a dice on the back end because it's a role-playing game first. And this is just like so Dungeons and Dragons, because it even though it isn't in multiples of 5, you can have a 97, but like a 92% chance, or like a 57% chance to hit something. But you'll always have, there's never a 0% chance to hit. You'll always have a 5% chance to hit, and you'll always have a 5% chance to miss. And that's because it comes from, you know, like it has the roots back in, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, a D20. You have the 1 and the 20, which is always a failure and always a success. And so you always got that little 5% at both ends of the spectrum. And so I'm glad that they kind of like call out you know, the origins of where like some of those features went through and came about. But it goes through and it talks about, you know, I just spent a whole bunch of time in the previous blog, talking about like accessibility and such. So I won't go through too much in it, but it is worth going through and reading. Because it is like if you're a person that doesn't experience any type of issues playing games, you don't have any conditions or anything that prevents you from going through and playing games without having to worry about accessibility options. I think that is definitely worth a read to go through and see the time and the effort that goes into these things for people that don't have that same experience that you do, and that their enjoyment is dictated by the developers spending time adding in these features to the game. It's worth going through and checking out. And I also like that they're adding in even more like sound options, so you can like just so that way you can jam out to music and have like the ambiance from the game. As with every episode, I've got the Diablo 2 soundtrack playing in the background, one of my all-time favorite OSTs of all time, as I just said, all-time favorite, figure of speech. But they, you can also change like just combat noises, so you're not just dropping all special effects noises, but you're just going through and changing like the combat noise. And so it's really nice seeing the developers continue to take the time and effort to to put this in to make the game as approachable for as many people as possible. The larger the community, the better, right? Like why gatekeep games behind accessibility options and such. So it's cool. It's good. The more people we have playing the game, the better. The Diablo community, I feel, while we can be vitriol at times, and as I've experienced directly, we at least are a bit more mature than say like the World of Warcraft community and such. Because it's just by its nature, it's a mature rated game. It's not as many younger players going through and playing or getting into the series now, as they could in some other games and such. So I think it's a bit easier to have these type of more mature conversations and such. I'm just continue to be glad and impressed. Whatever problems I might have with Sylvanas' story, at least like the WoW developers continue to add in more and more accessibility options to the game, and to continue to try and design the games from the perspective with that in mind, from the very beginning. And it's not something where they develop a game and then go back and it's like, oh, maybe we should change something. They're doing this every step of the way from the beginning, and I can't wait to see what that means for like Diablo 4 and what those types of features and such. Because hearing all the people go through and talk about like playing Diablo Immortal on a controller, or people that continue to still ask for Diablo 3 to be playable on the controller on the PC. What is Diablo 4 going to play like on a controller when it is like straight up? They made Diablo 3 work on a controller, but it wasn't there from the beginning. As much as people want to say, oh yeah, it was console killed Diablo 3, that was not the case. They had a team that went through in the beginning and had to then make the game work on consoles, and then from that point forward, development always kept consoles in mind, but it wasn't from the beginning. Diablo 4 is from the beginning, meant to be played on a controller, not just for consoles. You can play on PC with a controller, and that if it's gonna give me like the same experience as mouse and keyboard, and save my wrist, I am all for it. And I just had one last little thing to go through and talk about before going and closing out the show, and that was just it's awesome going through and seeing all of these thoughts and feedback, and just hearing from the devs from like the Diablo 2 technical alpha to today, as we're about to go through and get into the closed beta. I can't wait to hear what it is that the Diablo Immortal team learned, because the closed alpha was long. We had a lot of time to go through and play that game, tons of feedback, and I can't wait to see what it is that they found, changes that they're going to implement into the next phase of testing, because we still also have one more phase of testing for Immortal with a prospective launch probably December-ish, into this year. And I wonder, is it going to be one of those ones where we're going to have, like back-to-back releases, just like we had with the Diablo II technical alpha turning into the Diablo Immortal closed alpha? Are we going to go from like the Diablo 2, beta, the early access beta, into a Diablo Immortal beta? Maybe. It's, I've said it before, I say it almost every episode, but damn, is it good to be a Diablo fan right now. And I look forward to hearing more comments and such from the Diablo Immortal developers and what they learned, what feedback they got, what changes that they're going to be implementing for Immortal in the next phase of testing, and as we get closer to the release of that game as well. And hell, we're like, what, maybe year and a half, hopefully not 2 years, hopefully not anything longer than 2 years away from having these same types of conversations for Diablo 4, where we're not just trying to like psychoanalyze like these little developer tidbits about Diablo 4, and we're giving feedback on, images and such, and that we actually will have the game in our hands or on our PCs in order to play. I'm again sad that there was no BlizzCon again this year. We've got to wait even longer, but at least we'll have something, I imagine, to match a BlizzCon line next year for our next look into Diablo 4. I would love, and I think the only thing that BlizzCon line missed from this year was having some sort of in-depth gameplay. I would have loved to have if the developers had an interview while the game just played in the background. Let us see what a zone is. For a 20 or 30 minute interview or something along those lines, or as they're going through and talking, just have someone playing the game in the background, walking through a zone. We get so many looks. We got the first demo was in Skosglen, and then ever since then, the majority of all the content that we've seen looks to be from the Dry Steppes. Just have someone play through the Dry Steppes. Just let us see someone play. You don't even have to be giving commentary on the gameplay, though that would be cool. Would like that. But just having it played in the background so we can see more of it in action. See the combat in full action of seeing the enemies at the edge of the screen, initiating combat, killing it, picking up loot, going into the next, instead of just the little pre-recorded visuals and such. That's at least my hope. But it does bring me to the end of the episode. I appreciate everyone for going through, stopping by, that might have visited live in the chat here tonight. With just a little reminder that I do record these episodes live every other Wednesday, even though today is a Tuesday, over at twitch.tv/BlizzPro at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And you can follow the show on Twitter at the WM Workshop. For notifications when I go live, or when I have schedule changes or anything, as tonight where I'm recording on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday. So feel free to go through, keep tabs over there. If you have any questions that you would like answered on the show, any feedback or anything like that, to see the show be done better, or topics that you'd like me to cover, feel free to drop me a line. Westmarch Workshop at blizzpro.com. Again, that email address is westmarchworkshop at blizzpro.com. And then, of course, you can always follow me on Twitter. I'm at 9ballgamer. You can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/9ball, where it is the once in celestial convergence that I do stream, because I do plan on streaming the Season 24 launch here on Friday. So, provided that there's no, world-shattering issues that go through and pop up like I had happen last season, I hope to see you guys in just a couple days. Well, with that, it brings me to the end of the episode. Thanks again for going through, hanging out, and I will catch you all soon.